Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a woman who watched her stepfather drain her college trust dollar by dollar, smiled through 11 Thanksgivings, and then walked into a bank conference room with a stack of wire records no one knew she had pulled. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My stepfather stole my future when I was 17. At 36, I sat at the desk that could take his. My name is Eleanor Kate Whitman. I am 36 years old. I live in a one-bedroom on the third floor of a brick building in Hartford, Connecticut, and I work as a senior compliance officer at a mid-sized commercial bank downtown. My job, on paper, is to read numbers until they tell me the truth. On a wet Tuesday in October at 2:14 p.m., a routine reconciliation pulled a trust account into my queue. The account number ended in the same four digits my mother had written on a birthday card when I was 8. The balance was off by $91,000. I did not move for a long minute. The office smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. Outside, the rain hit the window in that flat, steady way Connecticut rain hits in October, and somewhere down the hall, someone was laughing about a weekend in Mystic. My hand on the mouse went cold. The cursor blinked over a name on the wire destination line, a name I did not recognize, a name that was not my mother's, a name that was not mine. I had spent 20 years being the quiet one. I had spent 11 years sitting across a dinner table from a man who told me grit builds character. I had not cried at his face since I was a teenager. But that afternoon, in a gray cubicle in Hartford, I understood that the rest of my life was about to change in a very small room with no windows. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I want to know who is sitting with me on this one. We lived in a colonial on a quiet street in West Hartford with a red door and a brass knocker shaped like a pineapple. My mother, Margaret, kept that knocker polished every Sunday. From the sidewalk, our life looked like a brochure. Hydrangeas in summer, pumpkins in October, a wreath in December that smelled like real pine because my mother believed plastic was a moral failing. The neighbors thought we were lucky. They told her so at every block party. My father, Thomas Whitman, died of a heart attack on a Saturday morning in March when I was 9. He was 41. He had spent 20 years as a structural engineer at a bridge consultancy, and he had spent most of those years quietly putting money aside for me. He set up an irrevocable trust the year I was born. The trust held just under $300,000 the day he died, and my mother told me once, sitting on the edge of my bed, with her hand on my hair, that this money was the last thing he had given me and we would not touch it until I was ready for college. She made me promise. I promised. For 2 years, it was just the two of us in that house. We ate spaghetti on Wednesdays. We watched old movies on Sundays. My mother cried in the laundry room where she thought I could not hear, and I pretended not to hear because that was the deal we never spoke out loud. Then she met Richard Hale at a charity dinner for the Children's Hospital. He was a regional manager at a commercial real estate firm. He had a square jaw and a navy blazer and the kind of voice that took up a room without ever rising. He told my mother she deserved a soft life. She believed him. They married 11 months later in a small ceremony at the country club, and Richard moved into my father's house with 2 suitcases and a leather briefcase that he kept locked on the top shelf of his closet. For a while, Richard played the role. He took me to a Yankees game when I was 12. He bought me a pearl pendant for my 14th birthday. He stood at the back of the auditorium when I won the regional spelling bee in 8th grade. The pictures from those years are the ones my mother still keeps on the mantle, and from the right angle we look like a family. But Richard had 2 phrases he loved. The first was a man who pays for everything, controls everything, and he said it the way other men say good morning. The second was the world does not owe you a soft landing, and he said that one to me, specifically, whenever the topic of college came up. He said it the night I made varsity tennis. He said it the morning I got into the gifted program. He said it on my 15th birthday over a flourless chocolate cake, while my mother smiled because she had stopped hearing the cruelty inside his sentences a long time ago. The first time I knew something was wrong, I was 16. I came home from school, and the door to his office was open by a sliver, and I saw him at his desk talking on the phone in a tone I had never heard him use with my mother. Soft, almost giddy. He said the word sweetheart. and the word sweetheart did not belong in that house. He saw me in the doorway. He smiled. He closed the door with his foot. He never mentioned it. Neither did I. The second time, I was 17. He pulled into the driveway in a new black sedan with cream leather seats, and my mother said we could not afford it, and Richard said, very calmly, that he had it handled. That should have been my warning. It was not. I was 17, and I still believed adults said what they meant. In April of my senior year, Richard and my mother sat me down at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. The table was set for three. Richard had made his coffee in the French press he loved, and the kitchen smelled like dark roast and burned toast. My mother had her hands folded on the placemat. Richard smiled at me the way salesmen smile right before the close. He said they had wonderful news. He said they had been thinking about my future. He said they wanted to handle my college money the smart way. He used the word handle 3 times in 2 minutes. He told me he was going to consolidate the trust into a quote-managed account at his firm so the money could grow until I needed it. He said the current trustee was charging us obscene fees. He said he had already spoken to the lawyer. He slid a single page across the table with 3 signature lines. He told my mother to sign. She signed. He told me to sign. I looked at my mother. She nodded the way a woman nods when she has already given up. I signed. I did not know it yet, but the pen I used that afternoon was the most expensive pen I would ever hold. For the first year, the statements still came. Then they came less. Then they came addressed to Richard, and he stacked them unopened on the counter, and my mother stopped asking. By the summer before my senior year of high school, I had been accepted to a small private college in upstate New York with a partial scholarship and a financial aid package that assumed my trust would cover the rest. The financial aid office sent a single letter in July asking for proof of funds. Richard handled it. I do not know what he sent them. I only know what happened next. On a hot afternoon in August, 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for orientation, Richard called me into the living room. The blinds were half drawn. My mother was not there. He had a glass of bourbon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He told me in that same flat, warm tone that there had been a market correction. He told me the trust had taken a significant hit. He told me there was not enough left to cover tuition, room and board, and books. He told me the smart move was to defer a year, work, build character, and reapply. I asked how much was left. He said it was complicated. I asked again. He said the world did not owe me a soft landing. I looked at my mother when she walked in with a basket of laundry, and she would not look at me. She set the basket down. She went upstairs. The stairs creaked the way they always did. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, a lawnmower started somewhere down the block, and the smell of cut grass came through the open window, and that smell has meant something specific to me ever since. I did not go to college that fall. I worked 2 jobs in Hartford, one at a diner on Farmington Avenue, and one at a small accounting office that needed a girl who could file. I lived in a rented room above a garage that smelled like motor oil and old carpet. I learned to make $100 last 14 days. I learned to walk into a bank and read a statement the way a doctor reads an x-ray. I learned, very slowly, that my stepfather had not made a mistake. I just could not yet prove it. I want to stop here for a second. If you have ever signed something a parent slid across a table, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know how many of us learned to read fine print the hard way. By 22, I had put myself through a state school at night with help from a kind older woman named Diane Marlowe, who ran the accounting office and treated me like a daughter. By 25, I had a clean degree, a junior compliance position at a small bank in Hartford, and one quiet promise to myself that I never spoke out loud. I would learn the system that had been used against me until I could read it in my sleep. By 28, I was a senior analyst. By 32, a compliance officer. By 36, I had a badge that let me into rooms most people in that building had never seen. I had clearance on suspicious activity reporting. I had a working knowledge of every wire transfer the bank had ever processed in or out of a trust account. And in the back of my closet, in a brown accordion folder I had carried through 4 apartments, I had every single statement I had ever managed to recover from the trust my father left me. I had pulled them from old court filings. I had requested them from the original trustee. I had subpoenaed copies through a lawyer named Janet Pruitt, who took my case on contingency the year I turned 31. I knew the trust had not been mismanaged. I knew it had been drained. I just had not yet seen, in black and white, where the money had gone. On that wet Tuesday in October, sitting in my cubicle with the rain on the window, I saw it. The trust account ending in those four familiar digits had been quietly serviced by my own bank for the last 11 years because Richard had moved it there in 2015 when his firm dissolved. He did not know I worked there. He did not pay attention to my career. He had told my mother years ago that compliance was a glorified secretary job. So when the routine reconciliation pulled the account into my queue, no one flagged it. No one knew. I sat in front of that screen and I scrolled through 11 years of outgoing wires. There were 43 of them, each one between $4,000 and $9,000, each one structured to stay under the federal reporting threshold by a hair. Every single wire went to the same destination account at a private bank in Stamford. The account belonged to a luxury rental management company. The unit being paid for was a two-bedroom in a glass tower on Washington Boulevard. The lease was in a name I did not recognize. A woman, 31 years old. The name was Vivian Cross. I sat with that name for a long time, then I opened a second tab and did what compliance officers are paid to do. I cross-referenced. Vivian Cross had been an executive assistant at Richard's old firm in 2014. She had left the firm 3 months before the first wire. The first wire was dated August 19, 2015, 12 days after Richard told me there had been a market correction. I closed my eyes. The office was quiet. Somewhere a copier hummed. I thought about the kitchen table. I thought about the pen. I thought about the lawnmower in August and the smell of cut grass. And I thought about my mother going upstairs with the laundry basket while my future was being signed away in front of her. Then I opened my eyes and I did the only thing a woman like me, in a chair like that with a badge like mine, could do. I filed a suspicious activity report on my own institution's system, naming the account holder of record, the structuring pattern, and the 11-year duration. I attached the wire log. I attached the destination analysis. I flagged it for federal review. I signed it with my full legal name. I sent it up the chain at 4:47 p.m. Then I called Janet Pruitt, my lawyer, and I told her the folder was finally complete. Take a breath with me. I know this part is heavy. If your hands are tight on whatever you are holding right now, let them loosen. The story turns from here. For the next 6 months, I lived a careful double life. By day, I worked my regular caseload and said nothing. By night, Janet and I built a civil case in parallel with the federal review. We had the wires, we had the structuring pattern, we had a forensic accountant named Patrick Devlin who reconstructed the original trust balance and traced every dollar. We had a copy of the original trust document my father had signed in 1989, which named me as the sole beneficiary, and which contained a clause that no successor trustee could redirect funds without written consent from the beneficiary upon majority. I had never given that consent. The signature Richard had used on the 2008 transfer paperwork was not legally sufficient. It never had been. In April, the federal review opened formally. In May, a forensic team from a different agency requested every statement on the destination account. In June, Vivian Cross was served at the Stamford apartment. She cooperated within 48 hours. She gave them everything: the lease, the text messages, the 11-year arrangement. She did not love him. She had simply been 20 years old when it started, and she had been told the apartment was a gift, and she had not asked questions until the questions came in a federal letter. I felt something for her that surprised me, not forgiveness, something quieter, recognition. In July, I changed my last name back to Whitman on every account I owned. I had been carrying my father's name in fragments for 27 years. I wanted it clean again. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment with a view of the river. I adopted a gray rescue cat named Hazel, who slept on the corner of my desk while I worked. I started seeing a kind, slow talking man named David Reyes, who taught high school history and asked on our third date what my favorite memory of my father was. I told him about a Saturday when I was 7 and my father taught me how to balance a checkbook at the kitchen table with a pencil and a yellow legal pad. David listened the whole way through. He did not interrupt. He did not try to fix it. He just listened. I knew then. In August, 11 years after I had stood in a hot living room at 3 hours in the afternoon and been told there had been a market correction, Janet called me. She said Richard had been formally notified. She said the bank had frozen the destination account. She said my mother had called the office 3 times in 2 days. I did not call my mother back. In September, my half sister Caroline reached out. She was 22. She was Richard's daughter from his first marriage, raised mostly in Boston, and we had only met 4 or 5 times growing up. She told me, very quietly over the phone, that she had always known something was wrong in that house. She told me her father was sick now, pancreatic, stage 3. She told me my mother had moved into a smaller place in Wethersfield and was not speaking to anyone. She told me there was going to be a meeting at Janet's office in October to discuss a possible civil settlement before the federal case went any further. I said I would be there. The meeting was on a Thursday at 10 a.m. in a conference room on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown Hartford. The walls were white. The table was long and dark. There was a pitcher of water sweating on a tray. Richard came in with a cane he did not need yet, and a navy blazer that hung off his shoulders, and a lawyer who looked tired. My mother came in behind him in a beige cardigan. She would not meet my eyes. I sat at the far end of the table with Janet on my right and Patrick, the forensic accountant, on my left. I had a single brown accordion folder in front of me. I did not open it for the first 11 minutes. Richard's lawyer made an opening offer: repayment of the principal over 10 years, no admission of wrongdoing, a non-disclosure clause for all parties. He said this was a family matter that had spiraled. I let him finish. Then I opened the folder. I slid the first page across the table. It was the trust document my father had signed in 1989, with the beneficiary clause highlighted in yellow. I slid the second page, the 2008 transfer paperwork with the forged consent. The third. The first wire to Vivian Cross, dated August 19, 2015. The fourth. A summary sheet listing all 43 wires. The fifth. The lease on the Stamford apartment. The sixth. A printout of the suspicious activity report I had filed on my own employer's system, with my full legal name at the bottom. Richard stared at the last page for a long time. His mouth moved before any sound came out. I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Richard, you told me, in our living room on an August afternoon, that the world did not owe me a soft landing. You were right about one thing. It does not. But it does owe me what my father left me. Every dollar. With interest. And it is going to pay me back through a federal court, because you took a child's college trust and you used it to keep a woman in a glass tower for 11 years, while I worked 2 jobs and lived above a garage." The room was very quiet. I said, "You handled it. I am handling it now." I closed the folder. I stood up. My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet. I did not say anything to her. I had said it all already, 20 years ago, in a kitchen with a basket of laundry between us, and she had chosen the stairs. I walked out. Janet stayed. The door closed behind me with a soft click. In the elevator, I watched the floor numbers count down, and I felt my hands stop shaking for the first time in a year. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments which part of the story stayed with you the most. I read every single one. I drove home the long way, along the river, with the windows cracked and the October air coming in cold and clean. I thought about a girl with $9 in her pocket and a rented room above a garage. I thought about the pen at the kitchen table. I thought about my father at his own kitchen table in 1993, teaching a 7-year-old how to balance a checkbook with a yellow legal pad. He could not have known what would happen to the money. He could only have known what he wanted for me. The rest had been up to me to finish. I said it out loud in the car, to the girl I used to be. I told her that being unwanted by a broken man is not the same as being unworthy. I told her the quiet ones are not the weak ones. I told her she did not have to forgive anyone to be free. She only had to put the truth on a long, dark table and walk out. I told her her father would have been proud because he had taught her how to read numbers, and numbers had told her the truth in the end. The federal case closed in March. The civil case settled in May. The money came back, plus interest, plus penalties. I did not buy a bigger apartment. I paid off Janet. I set up a small scholarship fund at the state school where I had taken night classes in my father's name for women going back to school after 25. I named it the Thomas Whitman Fund. The pineapple knocker is gone from a red door I no longer visit, but the yellow legal pad is on my desk. Hazel sleeps on it some afternoons, and every October, when the rain hits the window in that flat, steady Connecticut way, I sit with a cup of coffee and I remember that the quietest woman in the room is sometimes the one holding the folder.